Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. So you start out and give me your question or your questions, and I will do my tuning process.
Okay. So I'd probably start out with becoming online so quick. The first question I think I had was, I think I told you about it before. I don't know what to say it was, but I would call it a extreme mental health crisis that I had a couple of years ago. I know I have a lot of traumas growing up from childhood and stuff, and me being the little girl I was, I used to suppress it all. And just right after college, right like before I graduated high school, I had a house fire. And I think that was like the biggest breaking point for that. And I think that's one of the stories that I bring along with the whole mental health crisis that I had. I don't know how to fully describe it, but it was to the point where I was extreme self-sabotaging. I lived in a state of fear constantly and stuff. And now just looking back at it now, I think that's like my first what the fuck moment. Like, what the fuck was that? Like coming through that and now just being aware of everything and not even wanting those bad self-sabotaging habits to even happen. I'm like, how did I even get to that point? If that makes any sense, that's the first big, what the heck?
Yeah, it does make sense. So are you kind of wondering literally what the heck, like what happened there, or what's the question around it?
I'd be where it kind of stemmed from and how I allowed myself to get to that point. And then after I went to a partial hospitalization program for a little bit, and I don't think that really helped. It kind of did. But I think what mostly got me out of that whole limbo was, yes, better lifestyle and stuff, but also I met one of my coworkers is part of a paranormal team, and just meeting her and her friends that had some gifted abilities and stuff, just learning all that and her accepting me into it and them being able to show me all that kind of, I don't know if it downloaded something in my head, but it pulled me out of that really quick over the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And it's interesting to reflect back on, but
That's really cool. Okay. I'm gonna tune in. It takes me about 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll start sharing what comes forward. Okay, I'm seeing an attachment to a past life. Like really, it was like you said. I mean, you're correct that you had traumatic things in your childhood. Well, you are correct because you lived through it. But I mean, the assessment, the association is correct. You had traumatic things in your childhood and they weren't fully processed, but it also goes back deeper than that or goes back farther. So, what I'm seeing is a life of tremendous, I think it was so survival based. It was very traumatic. And it feels like I'm seeing you as a child. I don't even know if you lived past childhood in this life because that's kind of all I can see. And I can't really tell if you're a boy or a girl because your hair is long, but it's more long because you didn't have any parents. So it didn't get cut, But I feel like maybe you were a boy. The energy feels slightly more masculine, but it doesn't really matter either way. I'm seeing you as about like an 8, max 9-year-old child. And I don't know if you were abandoned or I don't think you knew because I'm kind of connecting to, I'm almost seeing the world through your eyes in that life, even though I can also see you. And it just feels like a constant state of fear. It feels like it was in Europe, probably Northern Europe. So something like Belgium, France, Germany, could have been England, but I don't think it was. I don't think so. I think it was maybe Austria, something like that. And it feels like it was probably in the 1700s. So, like the indications that I have is kind of the way that the landscape looks, or the way it's a cityscape. It seems like around the time of the Industrial Revolution, or maybe slightly preceding it. But like I see cobblestone streets and the streets are more pedestrian streets or built for horses and carts. They're not like built for modern vehicles. So it was pre modern vehicle, but it does, I think it's the 1700s. And I don't think you know where you came from or who your parents were. It's like just all you knew was growing up alone. But there were other children around, and there were obviously places that you got food somehow, but you were just kind of like a little street urchin, like little riffraff. You didn't belong to anyone or any particular house, and you kind of just found places to sleep. And it was not a happy life. Like I can feel all these flea bites all over you. Like you're often sleeping where animals slept, like just stowing away in a barn or a stable, sleeping in like cellars of buildings. Just there's lots of flea bites, open sores, feeling hungry almost all the time. And I can feel in your nervous system what that created. It was almost like similar to what you described after the fire. It was almost like an insanity, but it was because like your nervous system was shot to shit 100% of the time. Like it never got a break. So it was just like, I don't know, like having tics and being jumpy all the time. That was just normal. And what I'm seeing, the interesting thing, I think what triggered it is that there was a fire, but because you didn't have a home, it wasn't your house. It feels like it was like a series of buildings, like almost like a city block caught fire or a neighborhood caught fire. And it didn't threaten your home per se. I don't know if you died in it, maybe. I don't know. It's really hard to see that because I'm seeing it from your perspective. So let me sort of dial back for a moment and find out if I can look above your perspective. And if there's anything you want to say, don't worry about interrupting me either, too.
I would say because that was one of my questions, that it's like that makes a lot of sense because I'm living on my own now, and I have always been kind of a slob and like lazy, and it's been my parents never like that, and I don't really care about it, but I know that other people care about it. And I'm just like, I'm satisfied, but I do live kind of in, I wouldn't say squalor, but like I'm not the neatest person anyways, but I don't care. It's just other people's perspectives.
Yeah,
Makes some of sense.
it's not that I don't think that's that you're lazy in this life, but what I'm connecting to in that other life is just like there were no adults to model
Yeah.
anything for you. And so you got used to it was really just about like, where am I going to sleep? And am I going to have anything to eat today? And am I going to evade being caught by authorities and, taken somewhere scary to be part of like a workhouse or some institution or something like that? It was like you were kind of trying to dodge, kind of like Aladdin, but, not animated with like catchy tunes, no little monkey friend. No, you didn't die in this fire, but it was scary because it feels like it was almost like your house, but it wasn't, it's almost like you had you had a little nest that had worked for you for a while where you could slip in and out undetected into some like little cranny, like the closet in somebody's summer kitchen or mudroom or something like that. You had a little place. And it feels like it was a huge fire though. And from the perspective, like it seems to be important that I see it from your perspective. From being a tiny little malnourished, famined, scrawny little street urchin child, this fire was everywhere, all around you. It was like being an animal in a forest fire. It was terrifying. There was just fire everywhere, and you didn't know what way to go to get out because it was like a whole block was on fire. And so from the perspective of that life, it was really, like you thought, or it's not that you thought, it's just your life was already traumatic and stressful. And then this just amped it up, like 100-fold. And it feels like you did get out. I just want to see if there's anything else about this life that's important to know. You got out and you did grow up to be, I think you lived to be about 18. You worked with horses. So somebody just kind of took pity on you or something and taught you how to shovel the manure in the horse barn. And you eventually were like somebody's kind of stable boy. And then it looks like you had an accident of some kind, might have been related to the horses, like your foot got stepped on and then your foot was crushed and then it developed gangrene and you died or something like that. It feels like you died young, but the important part is just that the survival level terror and fear of that experience with the fire, but also just that experience in life is that's kind of what got exacerbated in the house fire experience that you had. It's like it was a dormant memory and it never got processed. And then it was triggered in this life. And what I'm getting about why it helped to meet your coworkers is it on a level, it reminded you that you're a soul. And so it kind of helped to take some of the edge off of it. Like it helped to soothe that part of your soul that was that boy to be like, oh, I'm more like it's okay. I'm still here.
Wow. Yeah. That is a lot. Oh, and it does make a lot of sense. Wow. I can definitely feel like I resonate with the whole survival mechanism. I kind of feel like with my relationship with money now, I've always had like a weird relationship, like financially and stuff, because growing up, we always got by and stuff, but it was just, I saw the stress that I gave my parents and it would always just come to me. And now finally living on my own, I have to have more responsibility on my own and stuff too, but I'm just kind of making paycheck and paycheck meet and just having to, have a car and having the financing of it and stuff and having to do that. And I know I have to balance playing the game and stuff, but balancing, like I never had the skills to do it. It's just, it is overwhelming. I'm satisfied, but on the other side, like flip-flopping, it's overwhelming playing the game. Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Let me look at my note. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense on how I'm constantly feeling overwhelmed, but it's more like I always thought it was more towards other people. I get very overwhelmed. That's why I like to be alone. I call it my hermiting and stuff. And I don't know if it's my empathic tendencies, but I always find it hard to fully connect with people, especially when I can tell when my frequency or vibrations like lower. I think in my responses, I told you later at night and stuff, I just intentionally, not self-sabotage, kind of is, but with substances and stuff, just to suppress those feelings and stuff. I think I never really learned how to rewind and just block everybody else's off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. All right, let me get some specific guidance around that for you. So it feels like this was not your only traumatic life. Like you've had a few traumatic lives, and most of us have, but it feels like you've had some traumatic lives that are still lodged in your soul psyche. And so there's a degree of where, and then you came into this life and had some trauma, and so your nervous system continues to carry the patterning from several different lives. It's almost like you are having, big epinephrine dumps into your system and like at a low level fight, flight, or freeze kind of, most days. So, what's coming through is the importance of repatterning your nervous system. And what I'm really seeing as being beneficial is EFT for you, emotional freedom technique, and tapping on the meridian points. And there's so many practitioners on YouTube, but finding the ones that tap you on like here on the side of your hand, on the side of your fingers, like you need the whole thing, not just the kind of the basic ones. You need the whole long circuit.
I actually just found, sorry to interrupt. I just
Ahead.
found that out like the other week. I found, I was like, what is this tapping stuff? Literally 2 weeks ago, I was like, I'm just going to Google it and YouTube it. And I found a quick little one. And that's definitely a synchronicity.
So if you can find somebody who does the long circuit and do the long circuit a couple times a week consistently, like don't fall when you go to use substances in the evening, don't use them until after you've done that. Like do that first to sedate your nervous system and repattern it and release all of the buildup of it's a charge of survival, fight, flight, and freeze. Literally, I can feel it in your system. And that's what you're sedating it with substances and you're kind of trying to like numb your nervous system so full that you can't handle other people's energy on top of your own. So do that first. And then if you still, feel like you need or want something to help dull the edge of it. I mean, ideally, we don't have to use substances in that way, but I also know that, just not using them cold turkey, if that's been your method, it's just not practical. Most people are going to do cold turkey. So you're negotiating with yourself and using tapping to release trapped energy in your nervous system and trying to use those substances more mindfully rather than as your immediate go-to to deal with this. And then in terms of the empathicness, let me tune into that. Yeah. So what I'm getting is that the you are empathic and you're supposed to be empathic. So we don't want to take that away. But what's happening, the reason that it's uncomfortable is because there are so many things in your system that need to be kind of healed, transmuted, and they get triggered by other people. But it's not necessarily in a way where somebody makes you angry. It's not necessarily that kind of trigger. It's just like, it's the same thing as having like the radio on and the TV on and listening to a podcast and somebody's trying to talk to you and somebody else is noisily doing dishes or something. It's like too much noise and you can't actually make sense of any of the information. So that it's triggering your nervous system by contributing even further to the overload that it feels. But as you do this repatterning, and I mean, there's deeper work to do. I'm just giving you the one that came forward first in terms of the EFT. It's like the most accessible and it's going to make a big difference right off the bat. So easy, free, you can do it. But what I do feel is like there's a degree of sort of shamanic soul retrieval healing that wants to happen to help you process those traumatic lives because they're pretty traumatic. And that fear that I was feeling around the fire, like that was the scariest part of that person's life, that boy's life. And in your psyche, in your soul nervous system, it's still there. So it's almost like you're going to have to go on a soul retrieval journey in a sense and feel that and feel it through, like guide him back through to the other side of it and his well-being. Because even though he survived it, he didn't ever fully feel like he could trust being alive ever again. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Too much, not too much sense, but no, it does. I have a lot of words, but they're coming out in a existential sigh. Like, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, let me think for a second. Yeah, I feel like I don't know if it's something I've been waiting for. It's something as what you're saying in the 5D, the master class, and I was listening to it a little bit before this, and what came out was you say we're kind of being a little, not like little brats about it, just like, what are we waiting for and stuff. I feel like that's how the limbo I've been in and just off. I don't know if I call it oscillating through, but I can tell when I am in this perfect mindset where I do feel the synchronicities coming in. I can kind of connect with other people, but everything else, it doesn't trigger me as much. And you're saying with every like noises and stuff, I do have a big thing with noises, and especially at work. I work in a dispensary in a tiny lab with buzzing and everything. And I get very annoyed at myself when I feel I get triggered and stuff. And I'm like, I feel it. And then I backtrack. And part of coming online and the self-awareness and stuff. And it's amazing that it can be so self-aware. But with the self-awareness, I sometimes feel like I beat myself up over it. And it's just this cycle,
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense though.
There's no need to beat yourself up around it. It's just the acknowledgement that your soul has been through some extremely intense experiences. And it's natural that we would never want to revisit those and relive them and feel them all over again. It's totally natural. But there's just something about it that it's like when people have recurring nightmares. It's like if you wake up from the nightmare at its scariest point every time, then you're just going to have the recurring nightmare over and over. But if you can manage to stay in the dream or go back to sleep and move through that peak fear and move through the nightmare and regain your control over it, then you don't need to have it again. It's very much like that. So there's no need to cycle around in self-criticism because you're doing an amazing job of being a human. It's fucking hard. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah. I feel like through my dreams, it might be coming out. And I have these sets of recurring dreams that it's kind of, I always would like joke that it seems like they're parallel realities, but it comes out in certain plots and like my work and my old house and my current life and stuff. It's just like pinpoints. And there's a lot of random shit and stuff that happens. And I do seem to get what triggered a lot in them. And I do feel that shaking in the dreams and stuff. And I feel like in those dreams, that's kind of me or my soul, like releasing some of it as much as it possibly can. Yeah, I feel like it just go in and my dreams are all chaotic. I don't know if that makes sense. I have another question where I can read this. This makes me also think if I do start that healing, doing more of the EFT, my meditations would actually be a lot more beneficial and I'd be able to connect more. It's one of my things I was asking about is I knew coming into this, I know I had a lot of healing, but also with that trying to meet my spirit guides. But I know that that wouldn't even be possible until I actually am able to do more healing and get used to it, if that makes sense.
That makes complete total sense. And generally speaking, yes, that's true. It's like you have major root chakra trauma, major root chakra trauma. And so that's keeping you locked in the root chakra. And it's not that you can't access your other chakras. It's just like it's a tiny whisper of what is possible because most of your energy is stuck in these memories of terror that you know, don't necessarily apply directly to this life. So, first of all, it's kind of hard to access them if you don't know that they're there. And second of all, when you know that they're there, it's like, I don't, I don't want to. Like, that's not fun. Your spirit guides can get through, but when you're locked in the root chakra, you're locked in a survival paradigm. So they can't get through with the same clarity. So that's the general. I mean, that applies to everyone generally. And I'm just going to tap in and see what specific guidance comes through for you. Okay. This is really cool, actually. This is not what you asked, but this is a really cool thing. So, what your guides told me is that there's a reason, though, that you have these root chakra traumas present with you right now as you're coming on board with your spiritual awakening and your psychic abilities. And it's because you are meant to do shamanic work with people. You're meant to work with plant medicine ceremonies, some of them being kind of of the psychedelic nature, and some of them just being medicinal, such as cacao or kava, that just help gently open doorways for people. But the how do they put it? Oh, there's a saying, and it's so beautiful, and I can't find it, but it's something like the gift is in the wound for you, the gift is in the wound. Your gifts are there. So you're going to lead yourself through it first. It feels like you're going to find a practitioner. And I know you just said that money is super tight for you. So you start where you are and don't feel like you can't do it without a practitioner. But it also feels like you do have a lot of trauma there. And that there will be a point where it feels right to work with a shamanic practitioner who can tap into past lives and do this kind of thing. And also, then that person kind of becomes your mentor and you become like an apprentice to that person and they show you how to do it and how to facilitate it for others. And it feels like you're really like part of your purpose for being here is to go down into that root chakra space that is full of trauma and learn how to be in it without fear so that you can feel the residual fear but you're totally aware the whole time that it's not real, kind of like for the majority of my life I couldn't watch horror movies, like I couldn't watch them, and my son loves watching them. He always wants to watch them with me, mostly because it's entertaining for him to watch me freak out. Even if I've seen the movie before, I can't handle it. But I think now I can. And he would always laugh and he'd be like, the whole time I'm just aware that it's a movie. And I'm like, the whole time I am empathically connecting with the story. And I think now I've gotten to a place where I can watch them and be aware that it's a movie. So it's going to be kind of like that for you. So I know that wasn't really what you were asking, but they came through to say that and to let you know that they are there. So they're going to feel they're going to speak to you through, yeah, you're a very root chakra person. So this is a beautiful thing. And this isn't like, sometimes we can think that there's a hierarchy to the chakras and there's not. The root chakra is an extremely divine space. And so you are a root chakra person and a body person, it feels like you have your predominant clairs are clair audience, claircognizance, and clairsentience. And it sort of comes in as a combination, it feels like probably that order. Like you get messages mentally in the form of sentences or sounds or things like that. And so it's a little bit like telepathy, but it can just sometimes sound like your own thoughts, but it's a complete sentence. Or you can hear a sound in your air quotes imagination, air quotes for everyone who can't see me. But you can, the claircognizance piece is like you kind of also know what it means, but there's some doubt within you where you're learning how to believe more in your own knowing and your own deciphering of the information that comes through. And then in your body, it feels like you empathically connect with people and you feel in your body what they are feeling. For example, some people make your stomach clench up, and some people kind of make you. This is probably also why you feel like a hermit. Is just it's a lot to deal with to connect with other people's energy, especially if you're around people who are not super conscious of themselves, not on a journey of self-awareness. They have a lot of density in their bodies and then in their field, and you feel it in your body and your field. And this might be kind of like edging on TMI, but it feels like it affects your bowels and your digestion a lot. That there's just like a
Yes,
level where you're purging other people's stuff.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Definitely at work with definitely a few people. And getting that gut feeling and trying to learn with it. Yes. I've won a few competitions at work going with my gut feeling, and I heard the number come into my mind. I'm like, it does work. But just learning and knowing not to be blocked and stuff.
Yeah, and keep practicing that. And I think the whole reason they brought this information forward in response to that question. So they'll speak to you in those ways through your body, through your clairaudience, and through your claircognizance. And it doesn't mean that you won't have clairvoyance, but it feels like clairaudience is more predominant for you. But they'll speak to you in those ways, but they answered that question with that information because they want you to make a slight shift in your perception of self so that you aren't viewing yourself as, oh, I need to do this work and heal this trauma in order to be able to access my gifts. You do need to heal this trauma, but it's sort of like the gifts are found in there. And it's sort of the difference between seeing it as a problem to be fixed versus a journey that is going to be extremely satisfying for you and lead to the opening up and the unfolding of a soul path, like a soul purpose life path that you're going to enjoy very much.
Yeah. I try to keep thinking it as a journey, but yeah, going through that major life change right now, it's been keeping me so blah. I've, I've definitely lost that. I don't know. I don't want to say a perspective, but like, as I was saying, coming back online and like, meeting my coworker more and hanging out with her more and seeing all that fascination, I was looking at everything like a kid again, and it was great. But I know that I was suppressing a lot more. And then I think finally becoming on my own and just going through the life change, it's bringing it up like threefold a lot more. And I'm trying, I want to say it's going away from the path that I'm supposed to be on, but definitely it just makes all sense what you're saying. It does. One thing I wanted to bring up too, because I also had questions about just the family ties and everything, and just knowing that my family has been like so splintered and stuff and how we're not as close. I was wondering if there's anything about that and how I could potentially go forth with just connecting with them more and just not. I used to be the young one that wanted everybody to get along together and everything just to be fine. And I feel like that's kind of still my role, but I know it doesn't have to be. But I'm just seeing if there's anything family wise as to why there's so much craziness growing up like that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so do you want to tell me just a little bit about like, is it the splintering of relationships or yeah, just give me a little bit of backstory.
Most of the traumas that I went through my childhood, it was basically my mom and my dad fighting constantly. I know there's issues with alcoholism and stuff. I think that there's some things that they don't tell me, but I'm not really sure. But it was just all the fighting and suppression and them taking it out on my older brothers, especially my older brothers going through their own kind of stuff. And then as we're all growing up, we just constantly like fight, and at each other's throats for a lot of reasons. And then my uncles and my father and my mom and stuff, them dealing with their other parts of the family, and then it coming down to general family drama. It seems like there is in our closest little family niches, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. That's perfect. So when I tune into the Akashic field of your family, it feels like some of them have kind of karmic ties together and some of them are sort of separate. Some of it's related and some of it is just circumstantial, but they're all sort of brought together in this, or they've all met up in this energy of like they're each bringing their own unique drama and conflict energy to the table, and they actually feel almost like ghosts. It's really interesting. So I think they have a lot of soul fragments occupying other lives. It feels like they don't even actually see each other. Like they just see their projections that they're throwing on each other. I don't know why they're coming across as ghosts, but it's a very similar energy. But I wonder if it's because almost all of them are caught in loops where it's like the same behavior, the same talking points, the same dramas, the same perspectives. And some of it, like I said, some of it's actually related. It almost feels like they have an actual looping dynamic together, but there are a couple of family members and they feel male family members who are, it's almost like you're like, are you even here with us? Because what are you talking about a little bit? How did you get that from what was just said? They're in their own perception. There's, but deeply, more than the average person necessarily, like deeply in their own perspective. It almost feels like, I think the reason it feels like ghosts is because it feels like a train station. Like they all just came together at this junction in this life. And some of them came in together. It almost looks like there's like a married couple. I think I'm seeing their past lives. I think that's what's happening because one of them feels like a soldier from the like Confederate soldier from the Civil War. And that's one of those people I'm talking about that is like, are you even having the same conversation as everyone else? Your perspective is it's just so different. And then it feels like there's a Victorian man and a woman, and they're in the life that I'm seeing, they're a married couple. It's so weird. The information doesn't usually come through this way. And then like an old man who's a farmer. He's kind of a grump. And I'm seeing a little girl with a balloon, and I'm wondering if that's you. This is a strange way for the information to present itself. But it feels like you're all waiting for a train at this train station, or you just find yourselves at this train station, and yet I think you're just passing through each other's lives. I think that's what it is, or like your soul trajectory, like you're just passing through. I think that's what the train station means. Is like you've all come to this junction point, but for the most part, you're just passing through. Feel free to ask more specifically about like any specific person, but the overall answer, the overall dynamic is that everybody is bringing a lot of soul history to the mix, to the family, but it's not soul history that you necessarily share together. Yes, and that creates more conflict. Exactly, a crossroads. It creates more conflict in a way because everybody's soul history is, some of it kind of matches up and some of it doesn't.
It makes so much sense. Yeah. I think, yeah, the most two people that you were saying when it's like they're talking, they're like, are you even here? It's mostly with my dad and my brother. They have this butt-headed relationship, and my sister and I are always just like, come on, guys, what is even going on? That makes a lot of sense.
I think your brother is the Confederate soldier. And like he feels angry, like
Hmm.
angry about, I can see him in his uniform and he's just, I don't think it was about, I don't know, maybe it was about the war. I think he was just angry altogether and he just carried that forward.
Yeah, that's one word that I put it on growing up. It's a lot of anger. And I never really understood that as a child. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any like suggestions that there are that maybe like I could, I don't know if I can really assist them 'cause I live on my own and stuff and just, I don't know, it's part of my purpose to even help them or just help their relationship or just do anything for at least the people that live with them. And so they're at least surviving a lot more feasible than they are now.
Okay. It feels like your brother is just, he's the one that stands out the most as being the hardest to shift out of his perspective. The guidance that's coming through is let it be what it is. Feels like there is some room with your father to bring him. I feel like your father might be the old farmer man, the grumpy old farmer man. And these are their past lives. It's so strange. So I don't know if he's kind of got that frugal, salt of the earth, practical, curmudgeonly sort of energy in this life, but that's the kind of feeling that comes through just a man that worked hard and took pride in that, but also didn't really have a choice. Very, very practical, very salt of the earth, but feels like there is some softness there. And the softness is not going to be found between him and your brother, but it's almost like you can coax your father away from engaging in butting heads with your brother so much by talking to your father more and connecting with him more. It's kind of like when he's arguing with your brother, they're both separate ghosts from separate lives and they're bouncing off of each other and it will go nowhere because it doesn't even have to do with the other. They haven't come in incarnated together. That it's happenstance that they are father and son in this life. And your brother's really locked into it, really locked into the anger, being that soldier. I think part of him is a ghost, like is earthbound somewhere, some battlefield or something like that until he kind of retrieves that. And maybe they'll be able to help him in the future when you've done, when you're doing soul retrieval kind of shamanic work on your own. But right now he feels pretty stuck there. But your father feels like he can, if you just, it's like you're just turning him in a different direction. And now I'm seeing them fighting under a beautiful willow tree, and your father's back is to the tree. And then you come over and you're like, Dad. And he turns and sees you and notices this willow tree, notices the clouds and the beautiful sun. And like it helps to pull him out of this bizarre, like locking of antlers that he has with your brother. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. I think that's me and what me and my sister have been trying to do constantly. But yeah, yeah, I can see that. Even my dad is saying like he's a lost cause, and I'm just always like, "Well, you never know that it could be you that also walks away as well."
Exactly. It's almost like you're helping your dad to walk away. So it kind of is like your brother is a lost cause, but I don't mean that in the sense that, there's nothing to salvage, but it's more like your dad and your brother are never going to get there with this energy. And the only way it will happen is if your brother is basically like if everybody kind of goes off and has a picnic under the beautiful tree in the sunshine and lets your brother brood on his own for as long as he needs to, he will start to come out of the fog of his own perception. But he will not come out because anyone's trying to get him out or to coax him. So the best and most effective thing you can do is just help your dad. It's not even convincing your dad to drop it with him. That's the funny thing too. They're both so stubborn. You just have to distract your dad with like more enjoyable things to pay attention to.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. One of the last things is I know there's a huge connection with me and my sister, and we had like a huge falling out, but now we're slowly reconnecting. I don't know if there's just anything important about my sister and me.
Okay. What did you and your sister have a falling out over?
I think it was more of the situation we were in and the living conditions we were in with and my mom too, and her trying to become sober, just being in the environment that she was in, I think, and just us with our own triggers possibly just fighting. And even as we were growing up and stuff, we would just fight, throw hairbrushes at each other. And I think it culminated. She had a girlfriend that moved in too. So I think also that and just the environment we were in with my mom, it culminated into a huge falling out. She moved out first, and then I ended up moving out from my mom to where I am now.
When I tune into your sister's energy, I see this little old abuela, and she's like almost. The reason I asked was because she almost slightly feels like she was maybe like a bruja. Like she has a little bit of that kind of like magic-y witchy feeling behind her, but it's as I don't know if it shows in her life, in this life, but that's the person I see on the train platform is this little old, and she was kind of hiding at first. And I was like, who is it? Like, who is which is are any of these your sister? And then she stepped out and was like, you couldn't see me because I didn't want you. That's what made me think like, oh, is she kind of like a witch? Is what's happening? So again, I don't actually feel any karmic ties with your sister. It's very interesting. I feel like you are on this platform together or this junction point, this crossroads. And I think you are the little girl that I'm seeing, but she's the one that you're most drawn to on this platform. So I'm sorry that I have to speak in such a weird, cryptic, sort of symbolic way about these things, but it's the way it's showing itself to me. So there's this Victorian couple and they're aware of you. They are not aware of your sister. They are aware of your brother. I'm not sure who they are, but they've come in together. But it doesn't mean that they're a couple in this life. But they come in as a couple from the Victorian times. And they're kind of hoity-toity and well-to-do, and they're noticing you and they're wondering who you are. I think you're the only one that can see your sister
Oh, wow.
as that abuela, and I think that that is a really important thing to know in this life. That I don't believe at this point she knows that about herself or like her soul history, but she's in disguise in this life. And I think she's currently disguised from herself. But I think you're going to help her remember her power and her abilities. And when I see you on the train platform together as it's being shown, she's nice to you. Like you can see her and nobody else can, but she's not, you know, everybody's a ghost there. So she's not more of a ghost than anyone else. She can camouflage herself, but she's kind of like calling you forward and giving you a little candy. She has a nice energy, but she can be kind of tricksy. So moving forward, your ability to see your sister is going to help her remember who she is, remember her soul self. And if it does feel like the conflict and the falling out all has to do with the chaos that mostly is being brought by your brother. Most of that conflict is your brother's energy, but some of it is your father's energy too. I'm not sure who I think that the woman, the Victorian woman might be your mom, but I don't know who the man is. Do you have any other siblings or do you live with a grandparent or is there feels connected to that might be
Yes. Well, I do have an older brother too who has two kids, my two nephews. But one thing that was part of the trauma, bizarre thing, she cheated on my father with a level 3 sex offender, and they're still together. And that was part of my falling out too with them because I always had issues with him. I always was skeptical. And then he said something, and I'm like, no. And I think she feels very connected to him. They went to high school together.
yeah, yeah. That's yeah. But they aren't karmically connected to you. They aren't karmically connected to your sister or your brother or your dad. That's the weird thing.
Hmm.
They're karmically connected together, but they're not connected to all of you.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So the takeaway is don't internalize any of this about yourself. It doesn't mean anything about you. They just happen to be the people that you were born through in this lifetime and the people that you grew up with in your foundation. If there comes a point where you even feel like you need to just totally cut ties with your whole family and walk away, don't buy into any notion that you should feel guilt and sentimentality around that. I mean, feel your feelings, but none of you are karmically connected except your mom and this man. So it's actually okay for you to all leave the crossroads, leave the junction and go your separate way. That's what's going to happen at some point, and there's no need to carry guilt around it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I could see that happening. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I had a feeling, part of spiritual awakening and thinking about all this stuff, I was thinking, I'm like, what? I had a feeling that there was something, but it's not, I don't know. It just makes a lot of sense. I don't have the right word.
I'm glad it makes sense because that last one, like seeing them all on a train platform as ghosts was very, I'm like, that's not normally how this information comes through. But I know that I just need to relay what I see. So I'm glad to hear that it lands and it makes sense on some level. And
Yes, definitely.
yeah.
Wow. This is kind of what I expected, but a lot more came up. And this is amazing.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah. I feel like this is what I've needed for a long time. I had a huge knowing of everything, but this kind of solidifies everything and gives me a lot more insight just to everything. Everything comes out like everything has been so synchronistic the last couple weeks. The simple tapping and kind of thinking about more of like my root and sacral chakra. And I'm like, oh, that's why I have a lot of back issues ever since I was growing up. I'm like, okay, just connecting everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And just sort of like the closing note is that the path that I can see for you is really beautiful. Like you're gonna love your work. You're gonna love the work that you do. And you're already on that path as you're exploring these things.
I know I'm always excited and stuff, and it's just like, yes, just everything that comes and attacks. And it's like the best gift that I have right now is the self-awareness. That's what I have to say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Erin. Thank you.
Oh,
I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
oh, thank you. You too.
Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.